Hey everybody, my name is Brandon. Welcome back to Cinefessions, where we talk all things media. And this is going to be volume 2 of me correcting my embarrassing blind spots for 2024. So at the beginning of the year, I posted a video talking about 12 of what I considered to be my most embarrassing movie blind spots. And throughout the year, I'm going through and watching them. So today, I'm going to be talking about 2 of those. First up, we will have Spider-Man 3 from the Spider-Man trilogy, the Sam Raimi trilogy. And then from the Planet of the Apes reboot series, we'll be talking about War for the Planet of the Apes. So because these both happen to be the third film in their respective series, do note that there will be spoilers for the prior movies, most likely, as I go through these. So just keep that in mind as we move into this. So let's not waste any more time at all. Let's dive right into volume 2 of correcting my most embarrassing movie blind spots. I think I mentioned I would start with Spider-Man 3, but I'm going to reverse that. I'm actually going to start with the Planet of the Apes reboot series. So I watched War for the Planet of the Apes, but however, in order to prep for that, I did go back and revisit Dawn of the Planet of the Apes because I've only seen that movie one other time, and I just didn't remember too much about it. Now, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, I've seen that one probably 3 or 4 times now. I love it. It's a 5-star film in my book. I didn't feel the need to go back and revisit that because I was super familiar with it. But Dawn, I really wanted to check out again. And frankly, I am so glad I did because there was so much about this that I just didn't remember from the first time I watched it. This is a brilliant film. I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. I think it is wonderful. So, moving from Dawn, that sets up everything that happens with War for the Planet of the Apes. This one from 2017, and it's directed by Matt Reeves, just like the first 2 movies in this trilogy. So, not only do we get a significant character trilogy in here with Caesar, we also get the director's trilogy in these 3 films. And of course, the reason I wanted to get to this one now is because I was going to see Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes this past weekend. So that's why I wanted to get through these. And that kicks off generations later. We have new characters in there and a new director, which I'm not going to talk about that one in this video, but I did really enjoy that. So anyway, War for the Planet of the Apes picks up basically exactly where Dawn left off, maybe a couple years later, I think it is. And we are entering into war. This very much is a war film. And it is just action-packed from the get-go. And because of that, I had a great time with this movie. This was basically everything I was hoping it would be. A wonderful culmination of the Caesar trilogy. Of course, Caesar being our main character. Again, I'm expecting that you've probably, maybe not necessarily watched this one, but watched the other movies coming into this because it's hard to talk about this without talking about the other 2 that led to this. But yeah, so with this one, we are just going to follow these apes as they are trying to, well, they're not trying to start the war, but the war has begun and they are trying to save themselves and their families that they, have developed here in this new world. And it kicks off, Woody Harrelson is basically our main bad guy in this, our antagonist in this. And he is awesome in this role. I think he does such a great job. I hated him, which is exactly what you're supposed to do with this. It's so interesting because you get like the good guy, bad guy dynamic throughout this whole series is so fascinating to me because it kind of shifts as the movies progress. And then in here, you actually have multiple sets of human characters, both antagonist and protagonist. And I think it is just so interesting to watch through this. The first thing I have to mention with this is the sound design. Not only is the score phenomenal, but the use of the other sound elements in this film is just as good. The use of silence in this, which Matt Reeves does toy with a little bit in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes as well, but he really goes for it here hard in War, and I think that works so well. It is very reminiscent of some other war films where they do, use that style where it should be this big, giant, loud battle, but instead they go the complete opposite direction with it, just to give that juxtaposition, and it really stands out and makes it sound awesome. It really lets some of the character moments that are happening within these battles really stand out, which I think is just a brilliant, move on Reeves' part when it comes to the sound design of this film. Let me also mention that I recently found out that I had a setting turned on my sound system that kind of basically would mute the louder action moments and emphasize the quieter dialogue, so it was more like one sound throughout. That's not how it should be. I want my loud action moments to be loud, big action moments. Well, I am so glad I did that before watching this one, because the battle sequences in this just rocked the house. And they were phenomenal. At the end of this, I turn to my wife and say, there is no way you can tell me that listening to this in this sound system is not a more immersive experience than watching this in the bedroom with just two speakers that are coming out of the television, because she's not big on watching in 4K. She doesn't care about that at all. She doesn't care about sound, but she absolutely said I was right, and it's just a more immersive experience. And because the sound design in this was so good, it really stood out and just made my point hit home even further. So the sound is phenomenal. If you have the right sound system, crank it up, because this sounds just excellent. As someone who is a gigantic fan of the original series as well, I was so in love with all of the homages and the references to the original films. We get a character named Nova in this as well. And that was the other thing, just the development of how the apes talk and how eventually the humans do not as we move into Kingdom. I had no idea how they were going to do that. And at one point during this film, that idea is kind of presented, and I'm thinking to myself, how did the humans just stop talking all of a sudden? It doesn't make any sense, but they explain that, and it works so well. It's kind of an evolution of the disease that's taking over this world that is allowing the apes to speak, and eventually is turning the humans mute. So I just thought the way everything turned right from the beginning, right from Rise all the way to War, this is just a phenomenal trilogy that tells an epic story that I am in love with. As much as I love Star Wars, as much as I love Halloween and all these other horror franchises, to me, my favorite set of films, my favorite series of all time, I think I have to put the Planet of the Apes up there, both the original series and this reboot series, because this is just as good as it comes when it comes to movies for me. I love the idea behind these films, and the execution with at least the Matt Reeves trilogy has been damn near perfect. It is so much fun to watch these, and they always go further than I'm expecting with this in all of the films, and this was no different. Again, all the kind of wrapping back to my original point here, just all the homages to the originals really makes the whole thing wrap up so nicely. And frankly, I thought Kingdom looked like it was going to be a remake of the original film. It's not exactly that, but that's kind of the idea I got, just because the way this is heading, it could absolutely lead into that. So just the character moments in this are amazing. Caesar is a wonderful main character, which is crazy. He's an ape, but he feels human, obviously, as he starts talking more and more. And that was the other thing. The progression of him talking from Dawn to War, it was creepy because he was talking so well in War compared to what he was doing in Dawn. And it just makes everything hit home a little bit more. So, I mean, there's so much more to talk about on this, but I don't want to get into spoiler territory. Oh, a couple other things I do need to talk about, though, are some of the imagery in this. Not only do you get, just a lot of war films that different moments in there that stand out from other war films you've watched, but there is a Schindler's List moment in this that was so awesome. It just blew me away. As I was watching this, I was just in awe. I felt like I was watching a scene from Schindler's List, and which is exactly what they're trying to go for here, given everything that's going on in this. And it just leads to this ultimate battle at the end, which again sounds absolutely phenomenal. Like, this blew me away. Another amazing film. The only reason I'm not giving this one 5 stars is towards the end when basically the apes are trying to win, essentially, without giving any spoilers. it is you have to suspend your disbelief a little bit because of what's going on. It's like all these people around this camp and no one is seeing all these things happen, which I'm being purposely vague. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But if not, hopefully I'm not spoiling anything. That's the only reason. Other than that, this is a damn near perfect film. I love this series. If you've not seen, I'm trying to grab the main box here. If you've not seen this trilogy, I mean, you're just doing yourself a disservice. I cannot recommend it enough. Rise of the Planet of the Apes is a 5-star film. On rewatch, Dawn is a 4.5-star film. And on first watch, War for the Planet of the Apes from 2017, I am giving 4.5 out of 5 stars. This is a brilliant film. And I didn't even talk about my shame meter. I totally forgot about that. With this, on a scale of 1 to 10 for this, because I love this series so much and do consider it probably my favorite series of all time, I'm going to put my shame meter at an 8 out of 10 on this. You know what? No, a 9 out of 10. Like, it is embarrassing that it took me this long to watch this movie with how much I love this series. All of, including the reboots, like just leading up to this third film in this particular trilogy. Shame on me for not watching this one sooner. But boy, am I glad I waited until after I fixed the problem with my sound system, because this thing was rocking the house. So much fun. I thought for sure we were going to wake up the kids. Fortunately, that didn't happen. But yeah, War for the Planet of the Apes, I cannot recommend enough. 4.5 out of 5 stars. It is brilliant filmmaking at its best. Let's move over to another third film in a trilogy, this time talking about Spider-Man 3. So in order to do my homework for Spider-Man 3, I watched the first 2 films in the Sam Raimi trilogy once again. Now, Spider-Man I've seen multiple times. Spider-Man 2, I really think I've only watched once prior to this, so it was really good to go back and revisit that one. And the first film, that one struck me in a way this time through that has never happened before with that film. It is frankly, I should have given it 5 stars, but I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. It is still an absolute masterpiece. I love that movie. I wrote a book on that afterwards, and I want to do a whole separate video on that. And because I have my thoughts written down, I probably still will do that because I loved it. It was just so great. And then Spider-Man 2, I also loved that one. If I did have to rank them, I would put the original above the sequel, but it's still just a great movie. The villain in Spider-Man 2 with Doc Ock is definitely a stronger villain, I would say, than Green Goblin. But frankly, this time through, I really enjoyed Green Goblin character a lot more than I have in the past. So it's hard to say which one is actually the better film, but I loved both of them. I gave them both 4.5 out of 5 stars. So leading into the third film, I had very high hopes. So this one is from 2007, and it is also directed by Sam Raimi, of course. However, this one does not feel like it's directed by Sam Raimi. This is a significantly different feeling film than the first 2 movies. And I'll say it right up front, I understand why people don't like this film. This was such a disappointment when you compare it to Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2. There are so many things that the first 2 films do that this one just throws by the wayside. The big one that stood out to me, though, outside of having a good villain character, the big one that stood out to me was just the lack of any comic book feel to this whatsoever. We get, of course, Emo Peter in this, but what would set that off is if we had these comic book feel to it. Like the transitions that Spider-Man does a lot, and it's still there even in Spider-Man 2, but much more in the original. Those transitions between the different scenes that really make it feel like a comic book film, but still bring all of the weight and the seriousness of the moment and of these characters. That is just completely lacking here. We get Peter doing a full-on dance sequence in this and his emo Peter thing when the Venom suit kind of takes over, and it was just so out of place and absurd. I have no idea what Raimi was doing with this movie. Right from the beginning, I turned to my wife and I said, why is he making these choices? What is going on? For example, Harry getting amnesia in the beginning of this movie, and then 20 minutes later, just that completely being gone and him remembering everything. What the hell was the point? Like, why even introduce that? It adds nothing to the movie. It just adds runtime to the film, really. I just didn't understand why that was introduced at all. And if I'm missing something, again, I've watched it once. It's very possible I'm just missing something. Let me know down below if there's something I'm completely missing why they did the whole amnesia thing. Like, was it to set up the moment between him and MJ? They could have done that in any other way, like, given MJ's character. It's just, I'm just so damn disappointed with this, which I feel like everybody else was back in 2007. I'm finally catching up now. But you spent 2 films building this incredible relationship between Peter Parker and MJ. And even Harry in there as well. I've never really liked the Harry character, and I like him at the one point and the amnesia point during this, but other than that, he's just not a very likable character. But still, he's a part of this. You build these first 2 films built with this incredible relationship, and this is what you do with it? Spider-Man 3 is what you decide to do with that? You just throw it all away. It makes no sense whatsoever. For some reason, MJ and Peter just don't talk about anything anymore. There were so many instances in this where I just couldn't believe the choices that were being made. It was so disappointing to watch this. And mind you, this isn't a terrible movie. I was reading somebody said that they thought the CGI in this was bad, but then they watched it on 4K and they realized it was just terrible. I completely disagree with that. When you compare it to the first 2 films, I think the CGI is the best in Spider-Man 3, which, given the fact that it came out, years later, that makes sense. But I thought it looked really good on 4K. But kind of going back to the film itself, Topher Grace's character, right, Eddie Brock, what a weird introduction to such a character. Now, I know Eddie Brock from Venom. Venom is an amazing film. I've only seen the first one, but I loved it. I definitely need to check out that sequel. But Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock versus Topher Grace, I mean, just night and day difference. I love Topher Grace, but it was like watching that 70s character in the Spider-Man world, and it didn't work for me whatsoever. There's a moment towards, later stages where Eddie Brock, of course, is Venom. That's not a spoiler. Everybody knows that. And he says to Peter as he's, beating him up or whatever, that, this is for what you did to me. You humiliated me. And it's like, are we supposed to feel sympathy for him at that point? Because why would you? He's a fraudster. He faked the picture earlier in the film. Like, he was just a complete lie. Like, I don't feel any sympathy for him whatsoever. The introduction of Gwen Stacy, I thought, oh man, Gwen Stacy in this? That's awesome. What are they going to do with this character? Nothing of interest. They do and that was another thing, the choices that Peter was making. I feel like I'm just ranting right now, so I apologize. But the choices that Peter was making, like with the kiss at the ceremony where he gets the key to the city. What? Why would he do that? I understand that the whole idea is that basically in this third film, he's now just become full of himself at the beginning of this. And that's how Venom kind of takes over and really plays that up. Like, I understand all that, but what a weird, odd, frankly, in my opinion, stupid choice. I just didn't understand that whatsoever, especially when he has a ring and is hoping to propose to his girlfriend. He then goes and kisses this other girl. Like, what? Why make these choices? It just made no sense whatsoever to me. I was so blown away by how disappointing Spider-Man 3 was. And again, I know everybody else had these emotions. Not everybody. A lot of people had these same emotions back in 2007, and I'm just now catching up. But man, I understand the hate. Again, not a terrible movie by any stretch. There are some scenes in this that I hated. The dance sequence at the bar, that whole thing, awful. Just awful. But there were some other things in this that I thought were really good. And that's the other thing. The villains in this, like, what? Just completely useless. The Sandman, I think Thomas Hayden Church is a great actor, but he's just given nothing to work with here. And the whole kind of retconning of the first movie with how Uncle Ben dies. Okay, fine, I guess. If you would have made it worth watching, if you would have made it worthwhile in Spider-Man 3, then I'd be all about it. But instead, you get this totally forgettable Sandman character, and you get Eddie Brock as Venom towards the end, and it's like, who cares? Like, it's not about Spider-Man fighting an evil character in this, fighting a big bad in this movie at all. It's about his terrible choices in his relationships and how he's going to handle them. Even, New Goblin, which is just such a boring name for his character. Frankly, that might be from the comic books. I have no idea, but just that was such a terrible name for the character. But even how things go with him, the fact that he was fighting New Goblin at the beginning of the movie, I was like, oh, this is interesting. That means they're going to kind of clear him out of the way for a new big bad, which sort of, kind of, but Sandman just was so kind of just not important whatsoever. And they do nothing to make me think that that character is going to defeat Spider-Man at all, which, again, it's not really about that. They're really going for the relationship here between MJ and Peter Parker, but they do that in such a weird, negative way that I didn't care about that either. It is a disappointing film. I am so mad that this is how Raimi wrapped up his trilogy, and I understand now why we move on to Amazing Spider-Man after this. So, I've said my piece. I've ranted long enough. I will leave it there. I am giving Spider-Man... Oh my gosh, I forgot my shame meter once again. This is one... Now, my shame meter for Spider-Man 3 was pretty high. This is one where, like, I didn't want to tell people I hadn't seen Spider-Man 3 when they're talking about the Raimi trilogy, because it's embarrassing that I haven't seen this one. And so my shame meter for this, I'm going to put at an 8 out of 10. That feels right, because War, that one is just a series I love. This one I loved also, but I've only seen it maybe once or twice, so I'm going to put my shame meter at an 8 out of 10 for this, and I will give Spider-Man 3 from 2007 3 out of 5 stars. Again, not a bad movie, but when you compare it to the first two, it's just garbage. So that's my thoughts on Spider-Man 3. What a disappointment that one was. All right, so those were my thoughts, my rant on Spider-Man 3 and War for the Planet of the Apes. I feel like I ranted about both of them, but for different reasons, loving one and disliking the other so much. But anyway, my goal for these is to do 3 in each volume. However, I did 4 in volume 1, and I just finished Spider-Man 3 a few hours ago, and so I really wanted to talk about that one tonight, so that's why I decided just to do 2 for this volume. But anyway, you should see a volume 3 here in the next couple weeks, another month, I don't know, but halfway through my list of 12 now, so really looking forward to wrapping this one up. But with that said, guys, let me know what your thoughts are on Spider-Man 3 and War for the Planet of the Apes. Do you love War? Do you dislike Spider-Man 3? I feel like we're at a stage now with, Spider-Man 3, given the age of that film, where people may be kind of turning around on it and liking it more now than they did back in 2007. So if you're one of those people, let me know down in the comments. What do you love about that movie? What do you hate about it? I would love to hear what your thoughts are so we can have a conversation down there. But that is going to do it, guys. So thank you so much for checking this one out. Before you go, if you could hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, that really does help me out. But I just want to say thank you guys so much for sitting through to the end and listening to me rant. That really does mean a lot to me. Before you go, I will just encourage you all to consume some media today. I'll catch you next time.